Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhusya Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Amadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Gurudeva Deva. Hari Om. We just completed the chapter 1 of Ashtavakra Gita, where sage Ashtavakra, in response to Janaka Maharaj's questions, that was done in the very first sloka itself, and he provides the highest knowledge that you are the witnessing self. There is nothing to do but something to recognize and claim, and you are witnessing not only this body, mind, intellect, but the whole universe itself. But this, is it response to the questions that Janaka Maharaj asked? Janaka Maharaj wanted to know Kadam Jnanam Avapnoti, how we can get knowledge, and Kadam Muktir Bhavishyati, how we can get freedom from this chain of birth and death cycles. Vairagyam cha katham praptam, how do we get freedom from these shackles of bondage, or how do we get rid of, or how we get dispassion for this? And tat bruhi mama prabho, please teach me that. So these are the questions that Janaka Maharaj asked, and Ashtavakra explains in such a way to keep the mind completely out and even beyond the questions itself, questions and answers, how we will see what exactly the Ashtavakra, the teacher taught, and how the student grasped, which will be discussed in the second chapter. And it starts right away that you are the witnessing consciousness, and you are not what you think you are. That's the fundamental question. So this is a question not only for Janaka, for every one of us, because we all think that what we are not, we are. So how can that be? Because whenever I say I am, and we don't stop with that, it says I am what? I am something. So that something is this, this, this. So the fundamental equation that we use all through our life, in fact not only this life, life after life after life, because the presence of this life means we must have used the same in the last life, and last life presence means last before that also, and it goes on all the way to beginningless. So what is the first time I started using? There is no first time, because the cycle of birth and death is beginningless. How can it be beginningless? It is like the beginning is a question of time, and the time itself is also part of this cause-effect relationship, and that which is beyond time is also beyond the beginning also, because when it's a beginning, it has to be starting point that is within time only. That's one way of looking at it. But the time itself is a cause-effect relationship, because for every cause there is an effect, and that puts a time factor, because the cause is always before the effect, and that contributes to a time, and therefore time itself is part of or a product of this cause-effect relationship. Another way of looking at it is, what is time? This is a fundamental question even in science also. So Einsteinian definition of time is that it's a gap between two things. So you need two things in order to have a gap. If you have only one thing, there is no gap. You cannot define a gap. So time is a gap, a distance, or the gap between two sequential events. Not any events, two sequential events. That is the experience 1 or the item 1 and item 2. So two items, and between that there is a gap. And Einsteinian definition is the gap between two observations by the same observer. So observer has to be fixed. So observer cannot change with the sequence. So that's not in the Buddhism. There is a Kshanika Vijnanavada, where the observer also changes with the observer, with the observed. So I observe this, then I go, and the observation also goes. That's called Kshanika Vijnanam. But how do you know that the second observer doesn't know about the first observer and the first event? So you cannot really define the time factor on that. So Einsteinian definition is that it is a gap between two sequential events. Now, what are the two sequential events? And I can put the gap as small as possible. So we said the present is a gap between the past and the future. That's a simple way. So gap between past and the future is the present. And how big should be the gap? We can say this year is a present, this month is a present, and this day is a present, and this hour is present, this second is present, this microsecond is present, this picosecond is present. Picosecond is 1 10 to the power minus 8 divisions. So we cannot keep on dividing until it's almost disappearing, that I cannot even measure it. Then what happened to the present? The present itself is gone, and because the gap is almost disappearing. But what is there is only that which doesn't disappear is the observer, is the one who is beyond the time, because he is the one who is dividing the present. So the observer is beyond the time concept. So when you say transcend the time, it is an observer who transcends the time. So present is sequential observations, and according to Einsteinian, and the observer should be changeless entity. And according to Vedanta, changeless entity is only one, and that is Brahman. Brahman means infinite. Only finite things can change. Infinite cannot change. So therefore, only Brahman satisfies the requirement that it is changeless entity. And in the Einsteinian definition, observer with respect to those two observations has to be changeless entity. Now, Vedanta goes one step further. It says it's not just the observation, because every observation by an observer, we call it an experience. So instead of defining time as two sequential observations, we can define time as two sequential experiences. That defines now we are bringing an experiencer along with the definition. So if I have only one experience, then I cannot define time, even though I'm having an experience. This is precisely what happens in the deep sleep state, where I know I am going to sleep. Once I am in the deep sleep state, I don't know when I entered, how I entered, but I am in the deep sleep state, and there is no question of time, space, both are gone. But I slept very well. Who slept very well? The fellow in the morning makes a declaration that I slept very well. That is declaration by the mind. But the mind itself was folded as though, so it's not recording the subject-object duality, or observer-observed duality is not there. Only when you observe you can define a time. So from the point of mind, there is no observer-observed reality. All mind can know is, I know I went to bed at that time and I am getting up. I must have slept very well for so long. So how long I slept I won't know unless I measure a time after awake, and if before I went, I have 2 times, I can define a time. But as long as I am in the deep sleep state, there is only one experience and there is no way to define time. So I am transcending every day the time concept when I go to deep sleep state. This is why Vedanta analyzes you are beyond the space and time, because not only time, space is also related to the time. Therefore, when there is no time, there is no space also. So relativity is there. So if I go into deep sleep state, neither the time nor the space, and therefore all that limited by the space and time, that is the whole universe, is not there. But yet I am there because I say I slept very well. So I was there to sleep very well. Who is the deep sleeper I? Itself is a very interesting question, but that's not the point here. But at least one can look at it, because Vedanta analyzes. If you go to Panchadasi that we did, and the 11th chapter, the deep sleeper is analyzed exhaustively. Here, the Yajnavalkya says, I am the witnessing consciousness. Witnessing, I don't have to do all this. I can, even while going, when observing, I can shift my attention from the observed, so event 1, event 2, to the observer who is beyond the events. That observer, real observer, is Sakshi. And it's not the mind, it's the mind as though observes, but real observer is Sakshi, it is pure consciousness. Why? Because mind itself is inert. So now we need to know who has to realize, who has to analyze, what is Vairagya, what is liberation. All these things get confused, and some Acharya says that you have to go beyond the mind. Or Manasantu kim margane krute naiva manasam arga arjavat. So Ramana Maharshi says in the Upadeswara, the manasantu kim margane krute. What is this mind? If you try to inquire, then there is no more mind. Naiva manasam, and that is straightforward thought. So if there is no mind, how do you realize? See, Vedanta says, no, when they say there is no mind, it's not that the mind is absent, but you are looking at the structure of the mind itself by the mind. So I need the mind to observe the mind. So that's why Vedanta is very specific. Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. Mind is responsible for both bondage as well as liberation. So how is mind responsible? You just now said mind is inert. So we need to understand, as we discussed in this, who is a jiva, who is a realizer, who realizes, and who has the bondage, all that. When I say I am this, who is making the statement? It's the mind that is making a statement. I am the subject and this is an object. And when I identify subject and object as one, that means there is a confusion, because I am the subject and I can never be an object. Object can never become a subject. And I am only the one subject. Everything else, you are all, everybody else is only objects of my knowledge only, from my point. From your point, you are the only subject. So one subject and everything else is an object, because I don't see your mind, I don't see your consciousness, all I can see is your body. So rest of it is only inference from my mind that you have a mind to think also. So all these things have to be resolved. When I say I am witnessing consciousness, I have to shift my attention using the mind. So the understanding of that whole structure has to be, there's all-pervading consciousness all over, and that is infinite, that is pure Satchidananda, and no words can reach. So, yatho vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. So, navaggachati namanaha. So, mind cannot go there, the speech cannot go there, means I cannot intellectually comprehend as a thought process. That's what implication means. But I have to look at, mind has to look at itself and see what is behind the thought, or how the thought is conceived or conceptualized, or one become conscious of. And that is the process here discussed. So I am not this, because that's what is neti neti statement, because I am this, I am this, I am this. You say, Vedanta says first thing, you are not this, because this is an object and you are subject, you cannot be this. So neti neti vakyani, so not this, not this, not this, means you are rejecting what you are not. That is what is essentially vairagyam. That's a response to Janaka's question. How do I get the dispassion? By rejecting what you are not. That is, how do I reject what I am not? By knowing what you are, you can reject what you are not. Otherwise, it's only false. I am not this, I am not this, but I am again something else only. I will conceptualize what I am and what I am not. So any conceptualization again is I am not. So I am what? How do I know I am what? So you cannot talk, no more talk. But here the teacher teaches to a prepared mind like Janaka's, says you think in the direction, because you is illumined by, all this is illumined by you. You are conscious entity. When I say I am existent entity and conscious entity. And this is inert entity, including the mind. So how does mind think then? So mind, by reflecting the consciousness, it as though gains consciousness, or as though appears as a conscious entity. And we give an example, just as the moon, which is not a luminous entity, appears to be a luminous entity, a very bright luminous entity in the sky, by reflecting sunlight that is falling on the moon. If no sunlight falls on the moon, then it will be dark. And if no sunlight gets reflected, then I cannot see it becomes a black body. So I cannot see the moon also. What I am looking at is not the really moon. I am looking at the sunlight coming via the moon, and say moon is luminous. I can see bright moon. Moon is shining. Moon cannot shine. So in the same way, the mind, as though acting like a conscious entity, by reflecting consciousness. So when I say I am a conscious entity, the consciousness that is beaming through is by reflection process. It is I am all-pervading consciousness. That is what we call a witnessing self, and reflecting via this mind and appearing and making the mind appear as though conscious entity, so that I can know this, and I can transact with this. So this will be there whether I am a jnani or not. So all pervading consciousness is there, the mind inert thing is there, and whenever there is a mind, reflection will be there, because mind has a capacity to reflect. Whenever there is a mirror is there, it will reflect. And the reflection is called Siddhabhasa. But up to this is whether it's a jnani or ajnani. But ajnani is the one, is that mind who thinks I am a self-conscious entity. Consciousness is by myself, and therefore consciousness in the others are different. I am a different consciousness because I am this and not that. All these wrong notions is because of mind not knowing that consciousness that I am exhibiting is from this Sakshi, which is all-pervading consciousness. So the Ashtavakra says, you are the light of consciousness that illumines not only this mind, everything else also. So not only the mind is becoming conscious, even other minds are also becoming consciousness, and they also have the same notion as you have. They think they are only the mind, but you are actually one consciousness that is illumining everything else. And that's what is called, you are the light of all lights. It's called Jyotir Jyotihi Swayam Jyoti Ahameva Ahamavyeha. In the Brahmanandavalli, Shankaracharya says, I am the light of all lights. I light everything else. And that's what we said. in the sloka, natatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam nema vidyudo bandikutoyam agnihi tameva vandam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. You are the light of all lights and you illumine everything. How can I show this light so that I can see you? But what this is, we put a karpuram, and karpuram has a property, when it burns, it doesn't leave anything else. And it has a vasana. So karpuram is symbolism of vasana. Vasana means smell. So karpuram is symbolic of the individual vasanas, and in the burning of the vasanas, I see the light of all pervading inside. That's what Krishna says, that I am there in every heart. So Hridye Tishtati Arjuna. So Ishvara, the Lord, is there in every heart. We said heart is nothing but the very core of personality. What's the core of personality? I am. Everybody will say I am. Everything else is the objects which can be rejected, but I am cannot be rejected, because it's a reflected consciousness. Reflected is what? Reflected of the original consciousness only. So I had to shift my attention of the mind from the consciousness that I am conscious of everything, because I am conscious of this, I am conscious. So everything that I see is in my consciousness, because without it being in my consciousness, I cannot be conscious of it. So every say I can see this, I can see this, I can touch this. So every perception of every object is in my consciousness, and I am that all-pervading consciousness is the teaching itself. So realization, what is jnanam, is recognition by the mind which is confused, which takes I am this, but shift the attention of I am this to that I am all-pervading consciousness. I am independent of anything because I am self-sustaining, self-existing entity, everything else in me. I can dismiss everything when I go to this sleep state, but I cannot dismiss myself. Even to dismiss myself, I have to be there. So I am non-negatable entity. Anything negatable is not real, and therefore I am an independent, self-existing, self-conscious entity. Whatever that self-conscious entity alone is self-existing. That which doesn't have self-consciousness has to be illumined by a conscious entity for me to see. So without my presence, no world can be illumined, because I am the one. I'd say the chair is, the table is, this is, the moon is, the sun is, the galaxies are. All those things, without me, they cannot be established. It may be there, it may not be there. So unless until I know, that's called a name and a form. Naming means knowing. Naming involves knowing. And knowing means I have to have the objective knowledge of that for me to say it is there. Without me knowing it, the existence of it cannot be established. The same way in the deep sleep state, the question posed, is the world there or not? Oh, somebody else can see. How can somebody else see? Because even that somebody is not there for me. So from my point, nobody is there. And is the world there? I don't know, because I am beyond the time and space. So it becomes an indeterminate problem, anirvachaniyam, because there is no subject to establish the object. Subject-object duality, both are covered by the ignorance, that is the deep sleep state. Even jnani going to sleep, don't say jnani is always awake. Jnani sleep, because jnani's mind will go into sleep from what? It's transactional reality. So transactional subject-object duality, your jnani goes away, and he is reveling in himself by himself then. He revels, he sleeps as a jnani sleeps as a jnani. And when he wakes up, jnani wakes up as a jnani, and jnani wakes up as a jnani, because the knowledge is in the mind. So with the mind, along with knowledge, it comes out. And when it transacts in the world, it transacts as though a jnani transacts. So when a jnani knows that I am the total witness consciousness, which Krishna calls it, sarvabhutastam atmanam Sarvabhutastam Atmanam and Sarvabhutani Chamatmani. One who sees Sarvabhutastam Atma, one who sees himself in everything and everything in himself, he alone sees. He is a jnani. Same sloka, next sloka is Yomam Pasyati Sarvatra Sarvancha Mai Pasyati Tasyaham Na Pranasyami Sachamena Pranasyati. The one who sees me everywhere and one who sees everything in me, he is always with me because he himself is a part of me. In fact, he is not different from me. So that is essentially Tattvamasi statement. That's what understanding should be. That's what is the jnanam. And from that jnanam, the Ashtavakra says, the samsara is only because of bhranti, because of delusion, because you are taking this plurality as real, as though, and once you say real, I am real, this body and that body is different from me, and I need that body for me to be happy. I don't like this body, I like that body, I like this thing, I like all this rat race starts going after things after things after thing, because one wants to become infinite by gaining finite things. So even though I have billions and billions, I want some more, because I cannot become infinite unless I have everything. And you can never become infinite by adding finite things, because it's mathematically impossible. Then how do you solve the problem? I cannot solve the problem, but I cannot give up solving a problem. That is the human problem, where I am trying to become infinite by adding finite things, knowing very well that I will never reach, but I cannot stop also. I can only stop if I realize that I am already infinite. Then I don't need to do anything. I am already infinite means Aham Brahmasmi. That knowledge has to occur to the mind that is confused in the beginning itself. So that's essentially, I am not this started, and all this is illumined by me. I am pure consciousness, and that illumines everything else, and all this exists in me. Without my presence, the world cannot exist, and I am the pure consciousness and Swayam Jyotihi, and that is what essentially the whole chapter and highest philosophy. It's not a logical, there is no Purvapakshas and all that logical analysis. It is direct teaching, and that's what Ashtavakra Gita is. Because the student is already mature, he doesn't need any tarkam, because naisha tarke namatirapaneya in the Kathopanishad. By logic you cannot prove it, because logic itself, which we call it in the Vedanta, Anumana Pramana. Anumana Pramana is confirmed only by Pratyaksha Pramana. Only by observation only I can prove the logic, not the other way around. So by observing, that's what scientist does. He may provide a logical deduction and a theory, but theory is not accepted unless he has an experimental proof. Experimental proof is perceptual knowledge. Whether you use a microscope or a telescope, all scopes is only what you want to observe. That is, what is that which, these are only enhancing tools to see what cannot be seen otherwise. But everything comes under a Pratyaksha Pramana. So all the logic and science and everything, objective science, and they're all about the objects, and they cannot and have no tools to look at the subject, because the subject cannot be analyzed through objective tools. All the scientists say, there is no God, there is no this and all that. But the one who to say that, he has to be there. So it's like denying, I have no tongue to talk. So he's shouting at the top of his voice that I have no tongue to talk. So the very talking or very screaming at the top of his voice proves that he has a tongue. So when the scientist says there is no God and I am an atheist and so on, the very fact, that statement itself proves that he doesn't know what he is talking about. He himself is proving that I am part, even though he is confused about what that I am is pure consciousness. So in the Bible also says, I am that I am. And that I am is pure existent consciousness that Ishvara defines. With this, we stop here. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ